And we are live. Hello, and welcome to Forever Rugby on Forever Sports. It is a Thursday evening, which means that we are less than 48 hours to go until the second test between the Springboks versus Wales. And Thursday night also means it's fan forum, which means that basically for the next sort of half an hour, 45 minutes, I will never know. We'll wait until we see how we go, how long the electricity lasts, and how long the conversation goes. We're going to be basically picking apart the two sides and previewing this weekend in terms of what to look out for, what's being said about the whole clash. A lot of talk about the Bok team and some of the selection stuff like that. Sort of breaking down stuff like that, answering some of your questions and stuff. And yeah, so without any further ado, it is not just me tonight. On the fan forum tonight is Dill, who is back on the channel after this. It's been a while, Dill. How are you doing?
Yeah, no, it's been a while, but I'm glad to be back. I'm doing great, and you, Steve?
Yeah, can't complain. Can't complain. I can see we're both sitting in the dark. I've got a couple of USB lights which should keep me going, but persevering through the tricky road that is load shedding.
Yeah, I'm literally sitting on the floor in the room, actually, just trying to get some light out.
The things we have to do, eh? The things you have to do. Right, people. So whoever's watching, please do jump in the comments. Put your thoughts in there. Get some questions going. Let me know where you're watching from. Let me know what you think is going to happen this weekend. We do some score predictions a bit later. So, yeah, lots to come. So I see that we have David in the chat. Shanice earlier says she can't join. We've got Steven Swad. Welcome. What do you think of the Bulls' new two signings? Yeah, we can talk about that. George Friedrich Oosthuizen saying not just practicing A, B, and C team, and KPMG is here as well. So, well, I mean, it's been quite a strange week on the back of what was a very average performance. I think the Springbok management have made 14 changes to the starting lineup and 19 changes to the 23. Dill, what was your first reaction when you saw that team?
Wow. I expected him to, bring some players in and blood some of the newer players, but I did not expect that many changes. Also, particularly after a very poor performance in the first test, I didn't think we earned the right to rotate. But, since Ninaba and Rassi have come into the fold, they really do think big picture, and obviously they're thinking World Cup, and they want lots of depth going into that. So, I mean, I see it as very exciting. You can't really argue with the quality of those players. It's just the new combinations and whether they'll gel at that high level in probably such a short time training together.
Yeah, and I think what's quite interesting about it is the fact that it sounds like it was very much pre-planned. That this was always the plan, regardless of what happened on Saturday. This team had basically been picked 2 weeks ago. The two teams over the course of 2 weekends had basically already been picked, and now it's just a case of actually rolling it out. But before we sort of look at the teams for this weekend, I think it was somebody, one of the main sort of Welsh big journalists had a big article today saying that it's disrespecting the Welsh side in terms of naming what a lot of people are branding a B team. Now, I was at the Welsh press conference today, and Wayne Pivac as well as Dan Bigger both said that, if you look at the quality of players, you're definitely not going to be calling it a B team. And in fact, Dan Bigger went as far as to say that this was a team full of the form players in the squad rather than maybe sort of the more sort of settled players. And I think if you do look at the side, it is very much a bunch of players who have sort of been selected because they could not be left out of the squad. When you look at the likes of Marcel Coetzee, Evan Roos, Andre Esterhuizen, Kirky Arends, Apollo Fassi, Warwick Galant, all players who are just playing incredible rugby at the moment. So, yeah, I mean, do you think that there is an element of disrespect, or are you sort of, or sort of where do you stand in terms of, does it maybe not the element of disrespect, but does it devalue the test series? I think is the big word that people are talking about.
No, I don't think it devalues it. From a Springbok fan's perspective, I think it actually brings greater value. Because, I mean, Steve, maybe you know better than me, but I can't think of a time when we've made such radical changes in the name of building squad depth in a long time. So I think as a Springbok fan, it's very, very exciting on a whole, because, there's all these form players, as you said, and we've seen them rip it up this season. Like Andre Esterhuizen in the Premiership has been fantastic. He's been absolutely brilliant. And then Marcel Coetzee, people have been calling for his inclusion for months and months now. So to see him in the fray and that loose trio is just exciting. So, I mean, there's always going to be the negative media when you make such a radical decision. Radicalism is never met, just straight up. There's always going to be pushback to it. But I just think it makes it more exciting from my perspective. But also I can understand where they're coming from. Maybe they're a bit butthurt from losing that game because they lost that game as opposed to us winning it in essence, because 15-point lead at half time, you've got to capitalize on that when you have such a good position at a place like Loftus when it's full.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of the last time we saw change like this was probably that Welsh test in Washington, in terms of two very different sides from one week to the next. But I mean, that was a whole different situation because it was traveling and there were so many more things to it than just that. So yeah, I mean, I think it is the first time we've really seen two very different sides. And I think somebody said it in the comments earlier, and like I don't. It's a bit harsh to sort of say, but there is a certain amount of that Wales are not currently sitting sort of 1 and 2 in the world. They're not the most informed side at the moment. So if you're looking at the Bok calendar across the year, and you're going 3 tests against Wales, followed by a rugby championship where you've got 2 tests in Australia, and Australia having beaten us twice last year, you've got 2 tests against New Zealand. You're probably looking at maybe the home test against Argentina in terms of another opportunity to bring in other players, because you don't want to really make wholesale changes when you go away to Argentina, because it's one of the toughest places in the world to play. So, and then the end of the year tour, we've got, until Italy was confirmed on Tuesday, we had Ireland, France, and England, who are, all the top 3 European sides. So if there were to be a team across the entire year where we had to be able to make changes and be able to rotate people, it probably had to be Wales.
Yeah, no, I agree totally. But if you look at it just from like a fundamental perspective within the Welsh Rugby Union itself, like the franchises are in disarray, there's a huge funding issue there, and that sort of bleeds from top to bottom, and the Welsh team are not in a good place. So I can see why they're targeted. I agree with you in that way. But also, like I said earlier, I don't think it's anything to do with disrespect or anything. I think it's just World Cup in mind, building towards that. It could have been any team that were in this position. It was just the best suited at the time.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point. I think it will be interesting. And what I was saying before the season started is that traditionally, if you look at the last 15 years, the Springboks have always used incoming tours as the opportunity to blood new players. Not necessarily to this extent, but it always was of the 3 windows, between the incoming series, the Rugby Championship, and then the outgoing series. The incoming series at home was always the time that we traditionally brought in a lot of new players. Most players would make their debut sort of in the incoming tour. And we were robbed of the 2020 season where we had no rugby at all. And we were robbed of an incoming tour in a certain way last year because it wasn't a normal incoming tour, it was British Irish Lions tour. So this is the first incoming tour against a regular nation that we've had post 2019 World Cup. And I think it's quite exciting for me, the fact that you felt that when Rassie and Jacques came back to the squad, the setup, there was always the sort of long-term plan, and it was always about the World Cup. And you kind of get that sort of similar feeling now, where it's about the World Cup, which is quite exciting in terms of if we were to try and defend our title. And if they did, we're not talking about this Springbok squad being, probably not even arguably, they would then be the best Springbok squad of all time in terms of the success they achieved. So yeah, it's interesting. But in terms of this series, what do you think? And do you think there might be a pre-picked side for next week already, or do you think it's going to be very much, these 2 games have almost been an audition for the 3rd test, or do you think they've already got a relatively set? Oh, welcome to some power. Relatively set team for next week.
I think it's result dependent because you got to. He's spoken about building depth and building all of that kind of stuff, but then he's also spoken about Jacques Nienaber has also spoken about how everything good comes from winning. and you can't compromise a series result, if you know what I mean. Ultimately, they balanced it now by making this the development game, but then what does that mean if we don't take the series, and then we potentially lose the number 1 spot as well?
Yeah. The number 1 spot's interesting because I don't know how much. I kind of always got the feeling that the Springbok management don't particularly care about that number 1 spot. I think we as the fans probably put more of a premium on it. I think for them it's very much trophy driven. It was all about win the British and Irish Lions series. Then it's all about win the Rugby Championship. So right now it's very much all about win the 2023 World Cup. And I think that to a certain degree, I think that if we were to lose the Rugby Championship, I don't think again it would be a massive loss for the Springbok coaching management, because they'll also as point 2023. But the problem is it gets a bit sort of a grey area, because you also don't want to be that side that just lives between World Cups, and things are only there to play for every sort of 4 years. So it is a bit of a tricky one, because you do want to do very well in the 2023 World Cup, but at the same time, one of the reasons that you've seen that's always been so dominant is the fact that they pick up Rugby Championship trophies, the fact that they go undefeated in outgoing tours and stuff like that. What I think is quite cool is that obviously we've got quite an extended end of year tour in terms of having those potentially set to be 3 midweek games, which will obviously give a lot of opportunity to.
Yeah, so they confirmed Bristol this week.
Yeah, so there's Bristol Bears happening. Obviously they confirmed Italy as well, so that's also a nice opportunity to do a bit of rotation. But they are expected to have another additional 2 midweek games for that sort of select Springbok or South Africa select 15, basically an SAA side. So in theory, the Springbok squad will be playing 7 matches in November, which is exactly crazy, what we needed for a long time. Yeah, I mean, when was the last time we had a tour like that?
Yeah, I kind of think 2009.
Yeah, 2009 was, that was the interview we were saying, was when we did play against last sort of midweek game stuff that we had. But moving on from in terms of whether this was disrespectful or whatever, in terms of the actual team, let's look at the actual team in terms of what we've got to look with, because a lot of debuts, for example, and a lot of players who are not on debut but earning a recall. If you think of the likes of Marcel Coetzee, who last played 3 years ago, coming back to play his 31st game for the Springboks. Warwick Galant, who last played in 2019. Andre Esterhuizen, who's got 8 caps to his name, but sort of fell out the side. So I feel like there's a lot of players who aren't new to the box as the first time, but sort of coming back. So what was your sort of overall feeling in terms of the balance of the squad, and in terms of how many sort of new players? I mean, we're talking about players who are on debut as young as 22, in the likes of Evan Roos, to a 35 in Dion Fourie. What are your sort of thoughts about the new players in the squad?
Well, I think everyone's there on merit. I think we've really blessed at the moment with depth. Like, all of those players played really, really well this season, and playing against a lot of the Welsh players as well. In the URC, I think we've benefited hugely from that. And I think the Springbok coaching staff have been very good with their lineman camps and things like that. So, they're trying to build this extra large group of aligned players, maybe not necessarily players that have trained with the Springboks all the time, but who are aligned with the structures and all those kinds of things. So I think it's been brilliant in that sense. And I like to see Marcel Coetzee back. I like to see Esterhuizen back. Esterhuizen was particularly unlucky because, Damian Dilendi, his ball carrying was very important for the Springbok game plan, sort of heading into the World Cup. And, he was doing it really well. So it was just easy to not look past him. And I think the balance is really good. I like that Roos is there. I only expected him in the 3rd test, if I'm honest. But someone with that quality, I think he's just going to excel immediately. I honestly haven't seen a single season like that from a player in my life who's just so prolific in every sense. So I think they made good decisions, and I think they just looked at these players and just thought, well, they're absolute quality, and I think we can do this.
Yeah, and I think, as I say, it is quite a lot of players who, as you said, it's very much a team on merit, and that's what Dan Dickert used the term that this is the form team. because it's not, take away your Pollard and your sort of it's a better than Trevor and Yukani. It's very much a side of people who are there based on recent performances and to try and prove a point. What's quite interesting at the moment is if you look, for example, you look very much at the loose trio. Currently, no Dwayne Miller in the squad, and you expect him to come back. You expect him to be involved. How big do you think this opportunity is for an Evan Lewis, for a Marcel Coetzee to try and sneak their way into a plane ticket to World Cup 2023? Because you got to sit there thinking that Peter Steph, the Toys ticket's pretty much booked. Sia Khaleesi's ticket's pretty much booked. Dwayne Muir ticket, if he's available, is pretty much booked. I think that on the last year, I think Kwagga Smith suddenly found himself very indispensable to the box. So how many extra seats do you think are available, and which players do you think we're really going to be able to sort of try and throw the gauntlet down to make sure that they go into France?
Well, I think there's obviously a lot more chance in the number 8 realm. I think, with Vermeulen, is he going to start at the World Cup? We know. He's timeless in a lot of ways. But I think Jasper Wiese and Evan Roos sort of will feel they have a better chance at pushing for that. But then, the flanks is really tough because with Peter Steph, Tutoy, and Sia Khaleesi, they almost inevitably going to start at the World Cup, depending on injuries and etc. You're not going to drop your captain, and Peter Steph, Tutoy just keeps on going. So then that's when someone like Kwagga becomes very, very valuable because you can play across the whole back row. And players like that, Ulrich Loh is another one. You can put him on the side. You can put him on the side or at number 8. So I think Wiese and Roos will probably be fighting for one position in the squad, behind Vermeulen or in front of Vermeulen, just as the second number 8. And then flanks, it's all to play for. But I think versatility will be key, unless you're someone like Deon Free. I don't know if Deon Free will be in the World Cup picture, but he's a fetcher. We haven't really had that pure, breakdown attack, in a long time. So it just depends and execute their skills, at test level. These sort of newer guys, but I think someone like Kwagga is probably almost already on the plane. His versatility is so valuable. So I think that's where it is. Marcel Coetzee as well. He can play across the whole back row, and he's got experience. He's a leader as well. He's been brilliant for the Bulls as captain. So there's a lot of facets to consider. It's a huge headache for Ninova and Rassi, because who do you actually take? Because they're all brilliant.
Yeah, and I think that as you should allude to, the idea of versatility has become so important, especially with the fact that we now sort of operate with a 6-2 split. And I think that's why Albert Loh always had the inside track ahead of Evan Lewis, for example, in terms of the box squad, because first of all, you look at the way he plays, and he's far more sort of plays within the tight sort of phases of the game, much more sort of in the mold of a traditional Bok forward, but also, as you say, his versatility. He can play 6, 7, 8, Marcel Coetzee, same sort of thing. I think that's become so vital to the box. Like Franco Moster, for example, who's suddenly been able to, didn't have the best game on Saturday, but last year suddenly played in the number 7 against British Irish Lions and had a storming game. The fact that they've got so many players who can move around if need be it's interesting how the days of a specialist are sort of waning. And in many ways, I think that is counting against the likes of Jasper Wiese and Evan Lewis, who can only play in one position, or primarily only sort of play in one position. Which I say, I think, if there was to be no Dwayne Vermeulen, there could be space for both of them. But even if there was no Dwayne Vermeulen, do you go with maybe one out and out number 8 and then say, right, well, Marcel Coetzee can play at 8 if he has to. Albert Loh can play at 8 if he has to. Kwagga Smith can play at 8 if he has to. And you have 3 players who can all play at 8, as opposed to taking 2 specialist number 8s when you're only going to have like a 30-man squad. So there is, as I said, there are lots of things to consider. And I think that, Evan Lewis, I think, is going to have. I think he actually. I just sort of have this feeling he's going to have quite a tough time getting to that World Cup 2023. Because at the moment, I think he is behind Jasper Wiese in the pecking order. He'll obviously have a big opportunity this weekend to sort of show, try and jump up one. But given the fact that he is an out-and-out number 8, I don't see us taking 3 to the World Cup, as you said. So, but that's where like this weekend's a massive opportunity for him, because if the problem is if he has a big game, then suddenly everyone's sitting there saying, well, the URC wasn't a fluke. He's world class and he's going to be a big block. But if he has his struggles in the Bok jersey this year, then the easy thing is to say, right, well, he's got a lot of talent, but he might not be quite ready yet, and obviously he then becomes a project player for post 2023. So there are quite a lot of factors, and I mean, look, the loose forwards in this country are unbelievable when you think that there are certain players who could definitely still be part of that squad, but currently are. When you think of just number 8, something like a Pepsi Buthelezi still out there playing some very good rugby and stuff. But moving on sort of away from the loose trio, we've got a couple of interesting selections done in the front row. And obviously you've got Joseph Dweba who's going to start, Malcolm Marx on the bench. I think that's pretty standard. We saw that last year, and I think that Malcolm Marx has basically become a permanent 16. And it's weird because some people still hate the fact that he comes off the bench. I think it's proven to become a stroke of genius because I think he's just so valuable in that last 40. But Joseph Dweba, I think, is somebody who has to have a big game. Because Johan Kobala is pushing so hard. I mean, so there's nothing against Joseph Dweba to say that he's played badly when he had an opportunity, but we do have, a very, very good hooker who's pushing a lot. And the problem is the South African public are always going to push Johan Kobala. In many ways, they're always going to push Evan Lewis ahead of Jasper Wiese because you're watching him on a week-on-week basis. But do you think that, I mean, at this stage, also interesting picks were Thomas Toy at loose head and Trevor at tight head. Could have gone the other way around. Could have had Trevor loose head, Thomas tight head, and then Ntuka Nkuna had to make his debut off the bench. What were your thoughts on the front row?
Yeah, so like you said, it's really big for Dweba, also because he's recently signed for the Stormers. So if he can have a good international season with the Springboks and sort of make an impact in this game and possibly other games, then that can roll over into the URC, and then he's sort of in that, that public eye a bit more, at least for fans. Obviously, the Springbok management are managing them closely. I'm not too sure what the plan is with Trevor and Thomas du Toit, but maybe again they're just pushing for versatility. But I think they'll be fine. They're both world class, and so that makes sense. Chunu is a bit of a surprise. He's got immense talent. I can remember that crazy try he scored running from past halfway, showing crazy speed. So he's got huge potential. So I think we were just chatting a little bit before we came on air, and I think he could be a project player. But why would you include him so quickly? I don't know. Maybe they see something in him particularly. But we've got a lot of great front rowers. So if he comes on and he excels in the front row, then it's going to be very interesting to see, because then we can have like 8-9 quality front rows. And then just touching on Malcolm Marx on the bench, I think, I agree. I think it's a fixed role for him now. He's brilliant. He comes on 50-odd minutes, and he knows he can just empty the tank, and he can get in the opposition's faces, impose himself on the game, sort of get under the skin, get everyone riled up. And I think he thrives on that. So that's where I sort of stand with the front row. But it's, again, we talk about the depth in the loose trio and all the loose forwards, but the front row depth in South Africa is alarming, really.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking at tight heads, for example. I mean, you've got Trevor. I mean, you've got Thomas Toy, for example, playing at loose head this weekend. Was playing at tight head in the URC, and I think he actually might have made the dream team for the URC at tight head. But had an absolute storm of a season. And then you still think that somebody like Wilco Lowe is not included in the side.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And you still look at somebody like Carly Sadi, who's now moved to the Bulls. I have my doubts about whether that's a good decision, but I mean, he's been world class for the Lions as well. So I mean, it's incredible how tight head. When you think, it's funny how things go, because a couple of years ago we had Trevor, we had Thomas. How many people do we have converting to tight head because we just didn't have tight heads in this country? And now you think that you've got this incredible. In fact, in many ways, it's the loose heads that are the issue all of a sudden. And it's interesting to see the fact that they are trying to, I mean, potentially, like if you know that Thomas and Trevor can convert back to loose head, then that solves a lot of issues in terms of your loose head depth. Because I must admit, I was very surprised that Nkun's going to get a game so quickly, because I think that, I mean, I wouldn't even say he's really sort of, I mean, he hasn't really knuckled down a spot yet at the Sharks. So it comes off the bench, but they still have quite a lot of question marks over his sort of core abilities, his scrummaging abilities, stuff like that. Obviously, open play, he's a physical freak of a human. Stupidly fast, stupidly big, and I definitely wouldn't want to be standing in front of him. But I'll be interested to see if, because Don Human's done some wonderful things with that scrum. I think it'll be interesting to see if he can, sort of try and bring more of a sort of a prop skill set to the game over and above that his ball carrying. Because at the end of the day, it's fantastic that he can run around with the ball in hand, but if you can't pack it down the scrum, he's not really going to make it as an international prop. Locks wise, I mean, our locks are pretty sorted, to be honest. You're going to see a David Nokia, who I think is just the next Franco Mostert in terms of endless work rate. Not the biggest guy out in the park, but he's got that V12 diesel engine that just sort of continues going all the way. But Scrumhalf are a very big pick this weekend. Jaden Hensley getting a start, and then Grant Williams off the bench.
I like Jaden Hendricks. He's quite flary. He's got this sort of X factor about him. You can look at the try he set up for Pelele Fassi for the Sharks in the URC. I remember it distinctly. Just a cheeky little grabber from the base of the ruck, and like just little moments of brilliance like that from him. I think are really, really good. His kicking game's decent, but he's far more of a playmaker than any of our other scrum halves, I think. But he still needs to settle in. I mean, he's played a couple of games, but he's already scored a try. And I think it was clever to have him pair up with Andre, because Andre obviously is experienced, he's composed, calm. So I think that'll be the best way to get him to settle in. And Grant Williams, he's been in the structure for quite some time now, and he's played some pretty good games in the URC. But, we haven't really seen what they love about him. Well, I haven't, at least, because there's clearly something about Grant Williams that the Springbok management really, really like. So I'm keen to see that. I think he deserves his debut, having been in the structures for so long. So I'm very interested to see how Williams gets on. But I think Hendricks will do just fine this weekend. I think he's going to play a good game.
Yeah, I think. I mean, you talk about playmaker. I was having a session with other mate, not necessarily in form, because I think we can probably all say that Hendricks hasn't had his best season. I think that a year ago he was probably playing better rugby than he might have been playing right now. But in terms of the way he plays the game, in terms of his raw talent, he is very much in the sort of Fourie de Prio role, in that he can take charge of a game, and that he's got everything. He's got the whole bag of tricks. He's got a good kicking game, he's got a decent passing game, he can manage a game. Needs to sort his discipline out a little bit, but generally has got the, excuse me, calm down, has got everything that he needs. It'll be interesting to see how he goes, because I think that talent-wise, I do think that he is our next long-term scrum half, if they can get him playing to his abilities. But I'm a massive fan of Grant Williams. I was really hoping that the Lions were going to go after him when we were looking at the fact that the Sharks just had scrum halves for Africa, because I think he is a very off-the-cuff type player. And I think that Herschel Yankees is in a little bit of trouble at the moment, because I think that he had a pretty up and down season at the Stormers. I thought he started to come good towards the playoffs. I thought he had a couple of can't remember, it was the quarterfinal, semi-final, where I thought they had his best game of the season, but hasn't really been setting the world alight. So I think that Jaden and Grant have an opportunity this weekend to put their hand up to be that third choice scrum off, because it's weird, because Kobus Reinach obviously never comes off the bench. He always starts whenever Faf's injured. It is probably second choice scrum off in terms of if Faf were not to play, that's who would play. But I think if Herschel doesn't be careful, I think that Jaden and Grant Williams have got an opportunity to try and, move themselves up the pecking order.
Yeah, I think that's quite an interesting point, but I think they will always will respect Herschel's experience in a way, because he's won the World Cup, won the Rugby Championship, a bunch of things like that. So I think that will help him, but I do agree that the other lads are really coming through, and it's nice because there's a proper headache developing again. You can see in a different position.
And interesting that we've picked 4 scrum halves. I mean, technically 5 with Kobus Reinach.
Could you two shut up? Thank you.
The fact that we picked four scrum halves in the squad, as well as Kobus Reinach, who's injured. So there's a lot of scrum half depth there. Pollard back at 10, which I think we all expected, regardless of how Ultima was going to go. We all knew that he was going to come back. But also in many ways not somebody playing particularly well. He's been benched by Galbizi at Montpellier.
Yeah.
Probably had one of his worst Springbok seasons last year. Wasn't particularly good off the tee. Wasn't the Pollard. Wasn't really the general that we saw in 2019. So I mean, how under pressure is he, given the fact that Alton didn't go well last weekend, and the fact that there doesn't seem to be a lot of number 10 options that the Springboks definitely see as viable, and the fact that they didn't call up a Liebach or Hendricks or the likes. How big of a game do you think is for Pollard this weekend?
I think it's a very big game, but I think it actually suits Andre because he seems like someone that really enjoys the responsibility and someone who really enjoys the occasion. He's captain this weekend. He will enjoy that. After a tough season, he's coming back to structures that he knows. He's coming back to a team that he obviously, feels more ownership to than Montpellier was. So I think it's the kind of game that could kickstart Andre back to what he was. We also need to consider that he tore his ACL, and that since then he hasn't been the same. But then I really do think, given the extra pressure that there is no other Flyhalf besides Alton in the squad, and the fact that he's captain, and the fact that everyone is expecting him to perform, particularly after Alton's poor showing last weekend. So I really think the pressure is going to kickstart him, and I think he's going to stand up. He likes being a leader. He's got the full leadership mantle now, and I think that we're going to see Andre Pollard back to maybe not his best, but I think he will be a general once again.
Yeah, I think we need it. And look, and I think I said on my live show on Monday, we need him and Alton both playing well, because as I said, at the moment the Boks don't seem to really. I mean, they've got Johan Hurston in the squad, which I think speaks a lot about the current 10s, or at least the opinion that the Boks setup have on the current 10s, because the fact that you're looking at potentially backing someone who's made of glass in the last 120 minutes of rugby on a good day before he's out for another 9 months means that these two are probably our World Cup Flyhalves. Not even probably, they basically are. Otherwise we would have brought them.
But that frustrates me though, Steve, because like last week, to put Alton in after not playing for multiple months, coming off an injury, that's just poor management for me. I'm sorry. How can you not have another option there, And even if you do put him in, why can't we get someone like Chris Smith in? He doesn't even have to be in the match day 23, but get him in the structures. I don't even know if Chris Smith's the right guy, but get a third Flyhalf in there that's actually playing. And, build him in like you've done with Grant Williams or something like that. Because are we really going to take only those two Flyhalves to the World Cup? Because can we really rely on Hurston as well? So that frustrated me quite a bit. But, yeah, we'll just have to see. Andre has to step up because we're short of options.
Yeah, and I think that I was quite frustrated at the fact that Hurston was called up. I just didn't see that. I still do not see the point. Obviously on his day he's a world-class Flyhalf and he can change a game. But he just can't stay fit. And if he's going to be running around with the squad, I'd far rather have Jordan Hendricks, for example, even if you're not planning on playing, because Hurston's not playing again until he probably won't even play a Bok game. He might play an SAA game in that end of year tour. So he's not playing rugby for the next 6 months. Why not? Or Chris Smith, or I'll just go Hendricks because I think long term he becomes quite an interesting option. Why not have somebody else just getting the experience and training and being part of the Boks setup, so that, because at the moment, and let's be honest, Pollard hasn't had the best injury record in the last couple of years. So say he goes down next year in April, May with a major injury, you're suddenly going, right, well, Alton's our first choice Flyhalf, and we're now having to bring in somebody else, the second choice Flyhalf, who hasn't been part of the setup.
Yeah, no, that's not going to work either. And with Alton's playing record in recent times in terms of how much he's actually played, will he ever be able to be a World Cup winning Flyhalf? I personally don't think so. I know you won't like that, Steve, but I honestly think we need to build Flyhalf depth because our game plan's not tuned towards someone like Alton. That's why I didn't even bring up Liebach, because Liebach is similar in some ways. So that's why I brought up someone like Chris Smith. He's a mini Mornay, pretty much, and someone who can kick well, pass well, read the game, do the fundamentals correctly. That's what we need for a start at Springbok Flyhalf. And that's where Alton fell short last week, just basic kicks, kicking for goal. He kicked the ball dead. Yeah, but I'll stop crucifying Alton for your sake, Steve.
No, look, he didn't have a good game, and I think that, again, I think the fact that they had to show him because they have to give him game time shows you the issues. Ow! Could you just piss off? You've got these two bloody puppies who decided to just start eating my foot. That the fact that they felt that right now it would have been better to have played him without all those games than to bring somebody else in. I personally think that I was having this conversation with one of the guys today at the press conference, that I think that there are certain players who don't play in South Africa that if they want to go to the World Cup, for me, should be looking at coming down here for the season. I think Alton's one of them in terms of playing in front of South African public, playing in front of the coach's eyes, getting his confidence back up. And I think somebody like Jesse Creel, for example, is another. Because I think players who aren't playing a lot at Springboks, playing in Japan where people don't rate the league particularly highly, people certainly don't watch it. They do risk potentially missing out on selection because they're not getting the game time in a top league. I think that, for example, Pollard going to the Premiership was probably like the biggest relief for so many Bok fans, because he is going to play a full season at the highest level. So I think that's also an interesting sort of thing for me, the fact that certain players, I think, need to be potentially looking at playing down here and getting game time. Because, I mean, if Alton goes and plays 1,200 minutes with the Lions and starts playing like he was before he went to Japan, not even so much like in the glory years, but more sort of just before he left, where he was a bit more, maybe a little bit more conservative, but a bit more sort of well-rounded. I think that's his best way of getting into the squad. Okay, give me 2 seconds while I put these bloody dogs out.
I'm just going to shoot and get a charger.
Rule number 1, don't bring puppies onto a show. Right, we'll wait for Dill to get back. But anyway, so a couple of comments going. Where are we at? Obviously, says Goosen lives in a cast. Don't think he'll play box again. Great temper made of glass. Frankfurt versus can't replace Pollard's class. KPMG says kind of crazy that they're looking at Goosen for the third choice, at least then just a third and 9 and a fourth Flyhalf. Penalized says Alton and Fash should be given the boot to go find form. Mr. Boss says, Pollard, when he arrived on the scene, he was class. After these 2 years out of the game with injuries, not the same. Still, he's an okay player. Calm, nothing extra. I want to see the young Pollard. I think we'd all like to see the young Pollard. David says, I'd say throw in Sasha or Jordan. They're the same age as Marcus Smith, so why not? Marcus Smith is 23 years old. Sasha Ngonozulu is, I don't even think, 20 yet, so not quite the same. I like the Jordan shot. Again, I think that he's, for me, the obvious in terms of players of the future. I think that he's someone. The reason that he excites me is because physically he looks ready. He's a very good defender. He could very easily play it inside center. So I would have gone with a Chris Smith or a Jordan Henderson, added either of them to the squad. But then centers, you've got Andre Esthuizen and Jesse Creel. Jesse Creel, I think he needs a big game. But Esthuizen as well, after the big season he had, now needs to show what all the hype's about.
Yeah, well, look, it's his chance because, Damien Dilendi last weekend put in that tasty little grabber through to Cheslin Colby in the corner. And Damien Dilendi's very experienced now, more than 50 caps, all that kind of stuff. He's very, very trusted by the Springbok management. So Esthuizen has to grab this with both hands. But what it does it puts us in a great situation where we can go with some great options to the World Cup. But will you take 2 12s or you take someone versatile? I don't know. But as for Jesse Creel, last year I called him out in a similar forum, actually, with Forever Rugby, when he was put on the wing, and he really performed quite well. I think defensively, Jesse Creel will be there. but he'll never be, that slick sort of flary player like Lucanio. But I think maybe as they're quite a robust centre pairing, really. They're two big boys. So, pressure on Jesse. But I think Andre Esterhuizen is ready. I watched a lot of his rugby this year, and he's also benefited from, being fed by Marcus Smith, which always helps. But, I think he's ready, to grab it with both hands this time. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens at 12. Looking forward to the World Cup, but it's nice to actually, have another option bar Dielendi, in the squad.
Yeah, well, I think at the moment there's a big. I wouldn't say. It's not really a crisis at centre because there are lots of centres, but there just doesn't seem to be another option of at outside centre over and above sort of Jesse Kriel, and I think that's a bit of a worry. Look, I think that needs must. I would actually really, and John Dobson spoke about trying it, but I would have liked to have seen it. Is that he thought about Warwick Galant at outside centre, which was quite an interesting prospect for me. But if you look at the country, Ruan Nel was probably the form outside centre. Cornel Hendricks was sometimes playing up there. But Similani didn't have a particularly good season. I think the Lions have got a lot to own up about that. So I think that him at the Bulls will be a lot better. But yeah, I think that at inside centre, I think we're okay because obviously Daniel Villains is also playing some brilliant quality rugby at inside centre. But at outside centre, Ruan Nel's been part of the setup. He did have a very good season, so he is an option. But you don't just feel that anyone's sort of like bashing the door down in the same way that Andre Esterhuizen just said. I reckon at last year, this time, I don't think the Springboks management were even considering Andre Esterhuizen. I think as far as they were concerned, they were like, well, we don't really need him. We've got everything we need. And then you have the season and you get to the stage where you're like, well, we can't not pick him. He's playing too well. So I wouldn't say there's at the moment there's really a 13 who's doing that to sort of that extent and stuff. But then sort of finally, before we sort of start wrapping up a little bit, is the back three. Now, Warwick Galant at fullback. You as a Stormers fan, you'll have seen. What he done this season was just tremendous. Fassi and Orense on the wing, I think is quite safe. I think it means that they both are not going to get the thrown in the deep end in terms of a defensive point of view at fullback. A more experienced fullback behind him, but yeah, not where. Look, Orense has played quite a bit on the wing, but Fassi's played basically the entire season at fullback. But I think the Springbok management do very much see him as a wing. It's a very exciting back three. The question is, do you think they'll have license to do what they do?
I think they will. I think it's also clever in the sense of playing three fullbacks, essentially, because there will be an aerial battle. So, all of those players are really good under the high ball. So initially, that's a great start. And they're all great runners. Warwick Galant is a brilliant playmaker. I think they'll have relative license. I think Warwick Galant will probably just playmake anyways, as it's so natural to him. But I think it's going to be very interesting to see. Curtly Orense is brilliant. He's sort of Aplon-esque. I really, really enjoy him. I'm keen to see him on the international stage. He really reminds me of an Aplon. I'm so keen to see that. Pelele Fassi, we've seen him on the wing before, just in small snippets with the Springboks. But first touch for the Springboks, and he scores it was Georgia, but he still scored a brilliant try. So I think they are going to light it up. I think they are very fast. They are brilliant runners. They have brilliant ball skills, and their aerial ability will be important come Saturday.
Yeah, I think the aerial, and Dan Bigger very much said that, it's going to the kicking game is going to be very important because, look, they're all fullbacks, so they all should be. It's actually very interesting the fact that we are playing three fullbacks in the same lineup. But the aerial battle will be interesting because they've got. Alex Cuthbert's come in for Josh Adams. You've got Reece Zammit, Liam Williams. You're talking about players who are pretty good in the air and pretty big as well. Their back three is bigger than our back three, which you don't often sort of think when it comes to a Springbok. Even if you look at Alex Cuthbert, for example, I think he stands at about 2 meters and he's about 110 kgs. They've got a very big back three, so I think that aerial battle should be very interesting. And I think that for me, Fassi's biggest, and I was talking for me, I think everybody knows his biggest question mark is his defense, and that's why they sort of don't see him at fullback. But I do think it's going to be quite a sink or swim situation for these three, because they are playing against a back three who are very large and playing very good rugby at the moment.
I think it's going to be. I think the most interesting part is Galant on the counter attack, because sort of any poor kicks, anything misplaced in that regard. I think he's very instinctual in that way, and he picks holes in the defensive line. He's got an absolutely brilliant offload. So I think Galant will be so key in making this back three all gel together. And I think he's going to have a stormer. He's just been brilliant the whole season. I can't see how he won't.
Yeah, I tend to agree. And it's not even just the form he's in; it's just the confidence he's playing with. Like, he just looks like he's got more time on the ball. He's got an option. I mean, the offloads he's pulling off at the moment are disgusting. I mean, he's getting balls out which you didn't think was possible. So he is in the form of his life, and I've always said that he's the natural replacement for Villiers in terms of a playmaking fullback who can slot in at first receiver, who can find space in behind, kicks off both feet, which is a very nice thing to have. But so I mean, just in terms of looking at the Welsh squad and some of the matchups, it's the same starting lineup. The only difference is Alex Cuthbert has come in, a very big winger, a bit of a different player to sort of Josh Adams, who's not small, but not as tall, for example. And then it basically is the same. It's the same side. So I don't think we're going to see much different from Wales. But based on what we saw last week, what do you think that this Bok team needs to be aware of, and what do you think they need to do well to try and nullify the Welsh side that we saw last weekend?
Well, I think the aerial battle is going to be absolutely key. They placed a lot of emphasis on that. They really got it right in the first half. They had us on the ropes. We didn't have any answers. I mean, we weren't executing some fundamentals, but I think we could do with a bit more dominance as set piece. We did manage to get it going, but we need to start quicker. In general, we start really, really slowly, and it's the slow poison, that they talk about, where the bomb squad comes in the second half, and then we blow the opposition away. And if we're going to plan to defend the World Cup, if that's possible, then we need a at least 70 to 80 minute performance, because inevitably you do absorb pressure from the opposition. Every game, in a sense, is like that. You need 70 minutes of control to win the World Cup, and I think having Andre back will be very nice in that way. If we can respond better with our kicking game and put pressure on their defensive line and their back three, with our three fullbacks chasing hard up the field, and getting them in isolated positions, and maybe later on in the second half, someone like Dion Free, getting over the ball, that kind of stuff. So I think our kicking game needs to be executed well. Our set piece needs to be executing from the start. And we just simply need to start better. It's as simple as that, because we just don't do that, and it's frustrating, because if we could string together, more dominant performance from the outset, I think, then we're in a position to actually dominate the world like we want.
And I also think that we don't necessarily have the we don't have, I mean, it's a bomb squad in terms of a 6-2 split, but in terms of the experience coming off the bench, it's not like it's the regulars. Jasper Wiese is not coming off the bench. Siya Kliese is not coming off the bench. We don't have the usual sort of 6 players who are going to come on and change the game in terms of players who've done it before. So it's still quite a fresh young bench. Rowan Okiro on debut, Dion Free on debut, Reynard Alstad's only played about 2 matches. And Stukum Kunu on debut, Grant Williams on debut. So it's definitely not a case of, if things go badly, we throw in the experience and they'll be fine. So, I think we do have to start well, because I think also it's maybe in a reverse thing. There's always been that sort of leeway in terms of if we do start badly, we've got the experience. We know we've got players who can affect the game later on in the match. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. you can't rely on the bench chasing this match on Saturday because they are just as much in the deep end as the starting lineup is. You know, you can't say, right, well, chef, sorry, we've got an 18-point deficit, but you know, Instuku Nkunu, Reynard Ulster, Dion Fury, Grant Williams, Ruan Nokia with your 3 caps between the 5 of you, please go and win us a match. You know, so that's quite an interesting concept, the fact that we don't have that leeway, that room. I think if we find ourselves 18-3 down, we don't come back this time, because I think that maybe we do, but it's obviously a hell of a lot harder than you know, Kwaka Smith coming off the bench to the effect that he did. And somebody like Billy LaRue coming on and bringing on that leadership. You know, Dave Villas is playing fantastic rugby, but he doesn't always he's not going to have the same calmness that Billy LaRue will have. Stephen Kitsoff, a very good leader, sort of coming on. You know, he had lots of leadership coming on a week ago. So yeah, I think it's going to be very, very interesting. I'm going to start wrapping up there. So yeah, in terms of when we do wrap up, let's do a score prediction. What do you think is going to be the score this weekend? You either give a score or a team, and by how many points? Where are you sitting?
So I'm going to give a margin because I'm not brave enough to give a score. Yeah. Look, I think there's a lot of exciting players on the field. I think it's very dependent on how they gel. I think it's dependent on set piece and how well we kick, and if we can get our aerial game more correct. So I'm gonna be relatively bold. I'm gonna call Springboks by 10. I think Andre Pollard's gonna have a brilliant game and control it all.
Okay, and second question, and this is funny because this is becoming a bit of a habit. How many points do you think we're leaving out there from the kicking tee? Because I think I was looking at that on average in the last year. Apparently, we've left 8 to 10 points every single game out there on the field. Oh, do you think Pollard's going to get back to his 85, 90%, or do you think we're going to be sitting there going, leaving another 6 to 8 points out there this weekend?
Well, I really hope he gets it right, because you know that's one of the fundamentals we talk about. You know, that's how you win big games. That's how you win test matches, and that's ultimately how you win World Cups. So I really hope he does. I believe in Andre. I just feel like he's a man for an occasion, and you know, it's just this kind of responsibility and kickstart him, and you know, sort of get him back to that level of calm and composure and confidence. You know, that lovely blend that he used to have. I think he can get it back with all this responsibility. So I'm going to say Andre will miss at most one of his kicks.
Right, so it's Pollard to only miss one, Box by 10. Look, I mean, in terms of the idea of bringing back the general, his first time, I think he's Springbok captain number 63. So if there was ever a time to really start getting back to what he does best, it should be this weekend. Yeah, I think I'm sort of sitting at Box by 5 is sort of where I'm at. I might change it tomorrow when I do my official preview, but that's kind of where I'm sitting at. Dill, thanks so much for jumping on. Go enjoy the power that you now have. And we'll hopefully see you on a fan forum very soon.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Steve. It was lovely to chat.
All right, cool. And to everybody else, please make sure you subscribe to the channel. We are closing in on 13,000 subscribers. I think we only need another less than 300. So let's try and see if we can get there before Saturday. Apart from that, we'll be live tomorrow for our lunchtime show. And then we will obviously be live on Saturday for Ireland, New Zealand, England, Australia, and the Springboks versus Wales. Please do keep safe. Please do keep well. And we'll see you guys all very, very soon. Until then, goodbye.